The field for the Honda Classic looks a lot like what you might expect from a tournament squeezed in between the players, in between a WGC event. We have the match play next week. We'll have an opposite field event as well. But I mean, look, we still have some big names, at least for those of us. If you're watching PGA Q&A for this field, you'll recognize a lot of the names at the top anyway. But, without a ton of guarantees, without a ton of superstars, there's a lot of game theory, I think, that can come into play when we build our FanDuel lineups. And honestly, when we build out a betting card on FanDuel Sportsbook. So welcome to the FanDuel PGA Q&A for this week. I'm your host, Brandon Gdula. I'm the managing editor over at numberFire.com. I'll be talking about the field, the betting odds on FanDuel Sportsbook, the daily fantasy slate on FanDuel, my win sims, and anything else you want, because this is a Q&A format. So just hit up the comments section on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, or Twitch if you have questions for this week's event. We do have a cut this week. There are 143 golfers in the field. Last I checked, there have been like 6 or 7 withdrawals. And actually on FanDuel Sportsbook, the outright odds are down currently. So hopefully that does not mean I missed some news. I was panicking, looking for anything that I could find. I didn't see anything. So hopefully they'll be back up soon. But what you can see is at least the top 5 odds. Everything else is still up. So I'm assuming there's just, it'll be a matter of time. But you can see Daniel Berger, Sung J M, Joaquin Niemann, they kind of headline the field for me this week. Lee Westwood, been, runner-up 2 weeks in a row and playing some good golf, but how long will that last? Shane Lowry in the wind. We got that going for us. Adam Scott, Russell Henley, Taylor Gooch. Then the field drops off. I think it's those 8 and then a drop off to the rest of the field. But we see some other names who we probably have had some interest in to some degree in recent weeks. Dylan Fratelli, Cameron Tringali, Ricky Fowler is a nice 10,100 on FanDuel, so right around the position average for building a lineup. So he could be in play from that angle. But if we want to look at breaking down the course itself of PGA National, it's a tough course, not a whole lot of birdies to be had. And actually, if you go back through these past 11 years on Data Golf, you'll see only 5 names finishing double-digit under par. In 2012, there were 3. The year that Rory won. I think in 2010, Camilo Villegas, someone else in here was, I think, 10 under when they won. But either way, not a whole lot of birdies. It's more of a difficult course, more about avoiding bogeys than it is racking up birdies and fantasy points. So that does mean that a higher percentage of FanDuel points this week will come from finishing position bonuses as opposed to birdies and eagles. There's only 2 par 5s, so that's kind of how it's going to play this week. I always like to zoom in, hone in on this tool right here on Data Golf that shows what drives the variation in scores at a particular course. We can see the event average here, 40% from approach compared to under 35% for the tour average. So it's already, approach is already always the most important, the most the stat tee to green that just leads to the biggest variations in score, what actually is letting these guys get into scoring position. It's ramped up this week at PGA National at the expense really of the short game. It's not the putting and it's not the around the green game that really separates the scores. It's more the ball striking, specifically through the irons, and you can kind of see that here if I zoom in on some of these recent finishes. Not a whole lot of like pop weeks in putting. It's more these approach numbers that are leading to high-end finishes. Now, talked about ball striking in the off the tee play being a little bit actually less than your tour average. So is it more distance? Is it more accuracy? Last week we had some accuracy pop for TPC Sawgrass. This week it's more distance, which is almost in line with the tour average. We see a bit of a de-emphasis on driving accuracy. Sawgrass kind of play differently, right? We wanted accuracy last week to some degree. Distance, of course, is always in play so long as you can be somewhat accurate. But it is kind of a big reversal from how we kind of were finding our golfers last week at TPC Sawgrass for the players. So I think that's a big key, and that's always also something just to keep in mind in general, whenever you're building lineups, whenever you're looking at recent form. What were the courses? What were the recent courses? You can look at last week when a lot of guys missed the cut because it's a tricky course. But how much overlap is there between what's required at one course given the next course? So that's why I always like to look at a longer term sample as opposed to 2 rounds if someone missed the cut. It's not very predictive. We have more information than that, and that's what we should generally rely on in most circumstances. So again, driving distance, about as important as usual. Accuracy falls down, and actually, if we look down here, it kind of explains things like someone like Wyndham Clark, according to Data Golf, should play above his baseline by about 0.13 strokes per round, which is actually pretty significant. But I don't have to go through everything. But again, distance is more important than accuracy for me this week. And so if I had to give out my key stats for the week, it's going to be strokes gained approach number 1. It always is. Even if it's not more important than it is on your average course, it's still the most predictive, the most predictable stat tee to green that we have. So strokes gained approach number 1, driving distance is going to be on the list. Strokes gained around the green, strokes gained putting. We have Bermuda greens this week. Bogey avoidance. That means I'm listing a driver stat, approach around the green, and putting. So it's basically play the best all-around golfers, but there is some merit to that because the course is difficult. So it's going to test you from all angles, and it's something that we kind of see at these tougher courses. The better all-around golfers who don't have holes in their games, they can succeed. So that's how I like to play things generally. Question from Ryan on YouTube. What do you think about Chase Koepka as a cheap local guy? I have not looked into Chase Koepka. So this actually leads me into what I can talk about in terms of optimal lineups here in the past. Because I think there's kind of the narrative that we have a weaker field. I'll zoom in here. And we see not a ton of high-end golfers at the top. This is actually a weaker field than what we've seen historically. But if you look across these past 3 optimals from FanDuel, only one golfer was in the 7,000 range. That was Mackenzie Hughes last year. He finished runner-up. I don't know off the top of my head what kind of form Mackenzie Hughes was in, but 7,000 for Hughes, probably not really indicative of his form. Someone like Chase Koepka, probably more inclined to be someone that you don't really build around, someone in that 7K range. But, we have a difficult course, a weak-ish field, and we still haven't seen a ton of low-end golfers make the optimals. What you actually kind of see is a de-emphasis on the 9,000 range. So this week we have, I'll just show you the top 5 this week with Daniel Berger, Sungjae Im, Lee Westwood, Joaquin Niemann, and Adam Scott. We have some golfers at the top who sort of separate. And the 9,000 range, again, looks kind of weak, and then the 8K range looks good. So I don't think you really have to go down to Chase Koepka. Frankly, I haven't looked at him too much, but I don't like to play the home course narrative. It doesn't seem to work out as much as I'd like, and I think we have some better options. So really no Chase Koepka for me. Another question from Facebook from Sean, who should I absolutely play in my lineup? So if you're playing like a head-to-head, a smaller tournament, it should be Daniel Berger. I can explain that here with this tool that I have. He's just so much better than the rest of the field. It's not really reflected in the odds, and it's not really reflected in the salary. His salary is $12,000. It's not substantially greater than anyone else. Sungjae Im, last year's winner, is $11,800. But if you look at his total strokes gained, which for me is weighted for field strength and it's weighted for recency, he's just substantially ahead of the pack. Only Joaquin Niemann at 1.24 strokes per round is even close to Daniel Berger at 1.76. Russell Henley is a 1.04 and those are the guys in the top. So Daniel Berger, very underrated in terms of the betting market right now. I think there's actually some positive value on him. You can see my win simulations like him a lot at 8.9%. But I would say Daniel Berger is the one guy you should absolutely play. That sounds a little obvious because he is the highest salary golfer. He is the favorite, but you can differentiate in a lot of other ways. But I would say Berger is the highest floor. Like you can see here with Berger, green across the board. So, system check initiated if anyone is a Farah main or plays Overwatch at all. I don't actually know what the overlap would be between people watching the PGA Q&A and who would play Overwatch, but I know at least I do. But you can see Daniel Berger, just all green in all these key stats. Everyone else has at least a red flag or very close to it. So Lee Westwood close to a red flag in putting, 26th percentile on Bermuda for this week. So again, I think Berger is just so much better than everyone else in this field that I would say Daniel Berger is my must play, and you can definitely find other ways to differentiate from there. Another looks like a comment on YouTube. The Champion course, my home course, driving distance hasn't been much of a factor as it is strokes gained around the green for staying in contention. Any suggestions on guys that meet that criteria? So I'm still going to factor in driving distance. Around the green is definitely something that is on my list as well, which it usually isn't. But if you want to look for golfers who, so you want to look for guys good around the green, good best golfers around the green, adjusted for field strength and recency. Dylan Fratelli pops. Ricky Fowler. Fowler has some good form here. Super into Fowler, but he would fit. Chris Kirk, I think you can make a case for. Byung-Hun On, very good form here as well. So you can kind of go a balance build if you wanted from that angle. Lee Westwood, Shane Lowry, Lowry specifically plays well in the wind. So I think you could probably build a solid lineup just around golfers who are good around the green. I'm obviously not like giving out lineups here, but like I think Mackenzie Hughes is very much a play at 9,400, just because he's good at avoiding bogeys. So if you want to build like it's the stat I would probably pick not to build around ever. But if you think if you have that knowledge, I think that you could probably just make a case for like an archetype based lineup with guys around the green. We have some good options who, and again, these are golfers who are good around the green, but also have other things in their favor. So I think that's fine. It's actually a pretty interesting lineup overall. It's going to be easy to differentiate. You won't play. Berger's going to be chalky. So any lineup without Daniel Berger, I think, will be somewhat unique as it is. But again, good insight. And I think that, there's probably actually, this is something I want to dig into. Just building lineups based on archetype. And then if a certain type of stat winds up being the most important for a given week, and you're playing guys who have like those similar skill sets, I think there's probably a lot of merit to that. Hasn't really been research that I've seen. I want to research it when I have more time in the summer. So I think, again, the archetype lineup works with like Fratelli, Fowler, Ben-On, Hughes, Henley would work too. So I think that's a definitely a viable option from there. I'm going to go back to the studs quickly just because I think that everything starts with them this week. I think there are 8 golfers who are just ahead of the field, frankly. And we see that in the salary, but with Berger, Sungjae Im, Lee Westwood, Neiman, Adam Scott, Shane Lowry, Russell Henley, Taylor Gooch, you can see here that I have Berger and Sungjae sort of at the top. Neiman more of the differentiation play if he's getting some disrespect. But then Russell Henley, Taylor Gooch, I think are very fine plays below 11,000. I'm not so much in on Lee Westwood, Adam Scott, Shane Lowry, just because I kind of like the form from the other golfers better. It's less to do with them and more that I think that we have strong options at the top. And then I would say after Taylor Gooch, that's where the drop off occurs to me this week. And again, that doesn't mean load up on 3 golfers in the 11K and above range, or 10-8 if you want to throw in Taylor Gooch and Henley there, and build in the 7K range. That's not really what bears out at these tougher courses. It's more of a high end, like 10K and above. There's been 2, 3, and 4 golfers at or above 10K in the past 3 optimals here. And then you're kind of living in that like 8,000 range as opposed to the very, very low end. So I think that we can learn a lot from the optimals, not as in how exactly do we build our lineups and how do we just mirror this and pick the same salaries. Of course, that's not going to get us very far. But I think that we can learn what actually sort of happens in fields of this strength at courses that are this difficult. Should I play Westwood? This is from Sean on Facebook. Should I play Westwood after his play last tournament? So he actually has 2 good tournaments. Look at the performance table for Westwood from Data Golf. This is a very, very good tool. You can see course by course information that is adjusted for field strength, and it's free. But he has two straight runners up actually. With really good approach play. This is the thing I like to look at most is just recent approach play. If you're going to look into like a small sample, you want to see golfers gaining strokes with approach and off the tee, which is more predictive and able to be replicated than things like putting. So just because you see good putting doesn't mean he's going to be bad. So I think that Westwood is a justifiable play provided that he keeps up this performance. But for me, the long-term data is pointing more toward Joaquin Niemann for a lower salary, even Russell Henley, Taylor Gooch. But again, this number here, this weighted adjusted strokes gain total number, it accounts for recency, field strength. So from that specific, with those adjustments in, like Westwood's fine. I wouldn't bet him at 22-1. I don't like to bet golf for their variance too many weeks in a row. But I really don't think in a field like this that Westwood is out of contention. But I wouldn't play him based on last tournament. It goes back into like the bigger picture. And I'll just go over to Finder because it's easy to see with Westwood. Good adjusted strokes gain total numbers, not quite so good off the tee. And, again, if you're factoring in distance, just about field average there. So the main question with Westwood is going to be the Bermuda putting. He's putted well 2 straight weeks. Will that continue? Even if it doesn't, and the tee to green numbers are about the same as where they have been, then there's a case to be made for Westwood. But again, he's not someone out of the top 8 who I would really prioritize this week. But, he's not oversalaried. He's not off the table by any means. So I went through the top few guys. I can look at the 9K range, which again I don't have a whole lot of names like pinpointed here. I think if we can throw Cameron Davis in that conversation, he and Dylan Fratelli are names that I like. But other than that, I'm trying to avoid this range primarily, follow the optimal trends, but also I don't necessarily love a lot of these names to begin with. Mackenzie Hughes, again, was runner-up last year. We know what he does primarily. That is putt and chip. And if that is the kind of thing that you think, just put it on the fairway, get it close, get up and down, get your par, make a few birdies, enough to get to like 8 under. Maybe that's the winning score. There's going to be a lot of wind. I think Mackenzie Hughes is more in play at an event where it's going to be tough, and 8 under can win it as opposed to some place where you need to go 20 under. Kevin Streelman's kind of the opposite, with really good tee to green numbers, really good ball striking. And then Matt Jones is someone in that range I would consider just for the really good form of late. But other than that, I'm looking more in this 8K range with guys like Ryan Moore, Zach Johnson, Patton Kazire, James Hahn, and even John Huh. I can try to remember them all and type them into the Finder here. But I think that Zach Johnson, for me, is the best value play of the week. So I'll at least pull him up. So ZJ is gaining strokes relative to the sort of PGA Tour average player. at a pretty solid clip. That puts him in the 92nd percentile despite a salary that's just 8,800. He is in the 68th percentile tee to green. Really good approach numbers for the salary in the 83rd percentile, and a good putter, specifically on Bermuda as well. Just doesn't have the distance, but again, distance is not like a prerequisite. It only kind of matters as much as typical on the PGA Tour. But what I'm really getting at when I say the distance matters is accuracy doesn't seem to matter so much. So by having the ability to gain some leverage on the field with distance, that's kind of what I'm looking for this week. So, there are a good number of names down here in the 8K range I would be fine with, but this is kind of where I'm going to be living with my lineups. Really lock in the studs, specifically Daniel Berger, Sungjae Im, Russell Henley, Taylor Gooch, and then probably just filter in value plays from there. I think it's a good week to lock in your studs and rotate the values, because the values are going to have a much harder time coming through. And that sounds like it's always the case, but sometimes we only have a few really good standout value plays. And we have like 10 superstars to go through. It's a little bit different than that this week. I think the top of the top is really separate. They're really in their own tier. And then the value plays, even like 10K and down, there's a lot of similarity between them. So that's kind of how I'd be leaning to play daily fantasy this week. I'll go over to my win simulation model here before I look at some of my favorite bets based on the FanDuel Sportsbook odds. Daniel Berger rated out 8.9% likely to win based on my win simulations, which is actually two different models. One is more about your granular strokes gained, adjusted for field strength, and then adjust that to like what kind of matters at a particular course. And then one is across your round-around scoring, adjusted across the three major tours, so PGA, European, and Korn Ferry Tour, and I average those together. And Berger just rates out as like a pretty solid value at 11-1. So he's looking a little bit undervalued, at that 11-1 number. But then Russell Henley, once more, former winner, 5.3% likely to win. I'm always surprised by how much my numbers like Henley, but whenever you lead the field in adjusted strokes gained approach, and that's like the most important, most predictable stat. Didn't have it last week, but again, I'm not putting a whole lot of value into 2 rounds. So Henley, I already bet him. I feel pretty solid with that. Joaquin Niemann, Sungjae Im, similar win odds for me, but very different win odds based on the betting market. Niemann at 20-1, Sungjae Im at 13-1. So not showing a lot of value for Sungjae, getting that last year winner bump. Niemann, good, better recent finish, I should say, than Niemann, who I would prefer to bet if I had to bet one of those two, just at that number. Cameron Tringali, pretty solid value. I wouldn't consider him a long shot at 45-1, but definitely not short. And historically, even in fields like this, we see some better winners. So, I think Tringali is a good sort of low end play in terms of how far you're going with the betting card. There's some value on Kevin Streelman. Henrik Norlander's in very iffy form based on all the missed cuts, but the stats still like him. So I mean, look, you're not betting Rory, you're not betting Justin Thomas, Bryson, but it's all the same, if you hit a winner. So I like Berger at the top. I think that he's a very fine value. I like Russell Henley. I bet Taylor Gooch as well. There's a little bit of negative value on him based on my win model, but I like Taylor Gooch as a very, very balanced play for this week. And then I'm very interested in John Huh as a long shot. I'll actually pull up before I'm done. John Huh and Taylor Gooch to go over. They're not similar in terms of salary, but I just want to go through them both. I think Huh at 140-1 is very intriguing, and at 8,300, he's very much in play for me on FanDuel, but he rates out well. It's a small sample for sure, but solid, like baseline level putting on Bermuda, and just good numbers. So like I'm fine with John Huh And then Taylor Gooch, very balanced. Not totally green, but no black dots, which definitely is encouraging. So Taylor Gooch, someone that I'm always okay with, and I think that we're getting some good savings on him at 10-8 for his salary for this week. But I think that's probably going to do it for me. Went through the course, went through the field, talked about some of the best value to me on FanDuel, some of the best value for my win simulations on FanDuel Sportsbook. I know it's not quite the same as we had last week with the field, but again, it's all the same, really, with your FanDuel lineups, with your bets, just different names. But I think there's still a lot of opportunities to get out ahead of the field this week. So that's all I have for today. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Gdula13. Check out my DFS content on numberFire.com. Best of luck this week, and let's hit a winner.